guys, it's Dani. Welcome to another episode of our Orchid Care Tips for Beginners series. Today, I have such a good subject for you, one that you actually requested. We're going to talk all about why buds fall on orchids. We call this bud blast typically. And the reason why there may be various reasons for bud blast is because losing buds or giving up buds is actually a defense mechanism. It is a response from the orchids to usually outside factors, although not only. So you will always have to refer to your own situation, your own orchid, to correctly assess why your orchid might be losing buds. Today's video is sponsored by rePotme.com, who offers you everything you can possibly need to properly take care of your orchid, from pots and potting mixes to fertilizers, accessories, and much more. If you're into African violets or bonsais, they do have something for you as well, so I'll link you to their website down below in the description. Feel free to check them out at any time, and I will also share with you my personal favorite products from rePotme, which some of them I've been using for almost 4 years at this point, or even more. Alrighty, so with that said, let's start with the most common reason why your orchid might be losing buds. The orchids most prone to having bud blast are brand new orchids, the ones you just purchased from the flower shop and you took home. And well, the reason for that is sudden environmental change. Orchids don't go from the nursery directly into your home. They spend time on transport, they may spend quite a lot of time in flower shops, then you might decide to purchase it. But on your way home, you subject the orchid to maybe some low temperatures. If it's cold outside, if it's winter time, then you finally manage to get home where everything is nice and warm like your little orchid prefers. Well, all of this trip through all of these various environments takes a toll on the orchid. Naturally, orchids or their ancestors are not adapted to go through very fast and sudden environmental changes. So the first response of the orchid will be, hold up. What is even going on? I need to conserve my energy, and what consumes my energy the most at this moment? Flowers and buds. So the strategy is to shed off some of these buds which consume energy and will continue to consume it as they open and stay open, just until the orchid figures out what is actually going on around her. When the environment stabilizes, typically some of the buds will stop falling and continue to open, or new buds will even be produced. Either way, this is one of those instances where you don't necessarily need to do anything. It is kind of normal if you think about it. It doesn't mean your orchid is sick, and also it doesn't happen all the time. It all depends on this sudden change and how the orchid responds to it. So if you're experiencing bud blast on your brand new orchid, most probably this is the reason why, but it doesn't mean it is the only reason. So let's move on to some other common reasons which are not so normal. Another very common reason, sadly, are pests. You see, orchids do have some natural defenses against pests, and one of them is a thick cuticle on the leaves. If you have multiple varieties of orchids, you might have noticed already that if you ever get pests, some of the orchids will be affected much more than others. And well, this is because some of them don't have such a strong protection against pests. But when it comes to buds and flowers, there is no protection. These are very tender structures which happen to be very yummy for pests as well. One of the most well-known pests to attack buds are thrips. Thrips are very tiny and very slender, and the bud presents no opposition. They can go inside the bud and wreak havoc. What you will see on the surface is a yellowing bud which seemingly looks fine, just falling. What you need to do is take that bud and open it, and if there are any pests, you will definitely see them inside. Mealybugs are known to really prefer buds and very soft tissue, also aphids. But these bugs are pretty easy to spot. Although mealybugs can actually look a little bit like cotton. So if you ever order plants and they come wrapped in cotton, do examine them very well. You might find that some pieces that you thought were cotton were actually mealybugs. Anyway, if you want to learn more about the more common pests that orchids can have even in your home, check the video down below. I do have quite the comprehensive guide, so if you ever have some pests, you will know exactly how they look like and more, a few methods to take care of them. But just so you know, flowers, buds, and flower spikes, they're very tender tissues that most bugs actually like. Another common reason for bud blast or bud loss is stress. Now, stress can mean a lot of things, so I'll give you some examples. Water stress or dehydration refers to the lack of water the orchid is receiving. So either it doesn't have roots to absorb water, either you're not watering it enough. Orchids suffering from dehydration are actually prone to shedding some of their buds. Again, this is a defense mechanism or a response to adverse environmental conditions. And especially with some orchids which are particularly sensitive to the amount of drought, you should be very careful that you properly hydrate them when they have buds and flowers. Temperature and humidity can definitely play a role as well, particularly with those orchids which prefer certain temperatures. For example, a hot grower is prone to losing buds if it is kept in lower temperatures than it prefers, and of course vice versa. Low humidity can cause issues for orchids which prefer high humidity, and also drafts which are very cold or very hot or very dry can also cause bud blasts and even flower loss with some orchids. So it's never a good idea to put an orchid in those types of conditions, in high or very low temperatures or in drafts which change the ambiental environment around them suddenly. And of course, repotting. Repotting can be quite a source of stress. Typically, we don't really advise repotting an orchid when it is in bloom unless you really have to, because there is a chance you will damage quite a few roots during the repotting process. And if you damage enough roots and the orchid does not absorb the same amount of water suddenly, it can actually respond with bud blast and more loss of flowers as well. So basically, any type of serious stress can actually determine bud blast. If you take your orchid from this table and you move it on the table next to it and you don't really change environmental that much, that's not necessarily enough to cause bud blast. Just make sure you don't put it in direct sunshine or in a draft or things of the sorts. Another reason the buds might be falling on your orchid is disease. And of course, there are various types of diseases your orchids might encounter during its stay in your home. Anything from root rot, crown rot, stem rot, or bacterial or fungal infections, even fusarium, they can actually affect the buds. Luckily, this instance is not very common. Typically, you will see if your orchid has issues, you will see the leaves maybe presenting some patchiness, some dark spots. Your orchid might go through dehydration first before it starts to lose buds. So even though it really is a reason, there are typically other signs you will spot first. So in this instance, it is kind of normal or to be expected because the orchid is responding to a stress, it is trying to handle the situation, or it is getting depleted of energy and it goes into conservation mode. So at this point, you need to take care of whatever is happening with your orchid. Even if the buds are lost, that is okay, the orchid can rebloom. You should just take care of the mother plant and make sure she is in good condition. Again, I do actually have a video in which I talk about the most common problems, let's say, you will face with a Phalaenopsis orchid, which I'm sure most of you have. I'll be sure to link it down below in the description together with other pertinent topics or links to today's discussion. Another fairly uncommon reason might be additives. There are certain additives or products on the market which can actually meddle around with the formation of buds, create some sort of mutations which actually lead to the bud not being able to form properly, thus yellowing and falling. And these additives usually refer to the plant hormones, which can seriously affect the formation of flowers. In this category, I do not include fertilizers, which, if used correctly, should not have any effect on your orchids. But if you're using fertilizers with additional additives, such as so-called vitamins, algae extracts, and things of the sorts, those are typically known to contain plant hormones. Some products are well balanced and will have no effect on your orchid, while others might actually determine some changes. I'll be sure to link you some information about this down below, some articles. I had this happen only once, but the good news is the effects are temporary. You will not permanently spoil your orchid. Typically, these hormones will affect the orchid while they're present in the orchid, but once they're spent or eliminated, they will not affect your orchid anymore, and your orchid should be just fine and bloom just fine. And the last reason, which again, thankfully, is not a very common reason, but of course it can happen, is bad genetics. Most, if not all, of the orchids you can find in flower shops or garden centers are actually hybrids obtained by humans. And while in the process of hybridization, sometimes errors can occur. So very rarely you can actually find those orchids which simply have very, very distorted flowers, distorted enough for the buds to not be able to open. So in the end, what will happen is at least some of the buds will yellow and fall. These are highly unstable mutations. They will not always occur. Some years your orchid might actually bloom better, while others it might not. And I actually had a case with a beautiful Phalaenopsis which for 2 years I managed to keep blooming, but the 3rd year the buds were just so distorted that they eventually couldn't open and they just fell off. So in this instance, again, there's nothing you can do. It is very rare, thankfully, but it can happen sometimes that some of the buds don't form properly. And this is quite common, 1 or 2 buds from 20 buds to not form properly. This is nothing to worry about. It's to be expected with hybrids, but there are those rare occasions when individuals have all of their buds severely distorted and unable to open. Do not confuse this though with Peloria, which is another mutation, but it is a desirable one. Typically, it doesn't lead up to bud blast, even though some peloric orchids can look like they have buds which don't fully open. That is okay. It is yet again a mutation. It's not a natural trait, but it is one that we actually prefer. So these are, in my opinion, the most common reasons why orchids go through bud blast. Of course, you can have other reasons, such as my pet ate my orchid's buds. Yes, that happens, but obviously that's not something to worry about. Your orchid can always produce new buds, but I do find that these are the most common reasons, even though some of them are quite rare. So I hope this video was useful and gave you some ideas on how to assess the health of your orchid, maybe things you should try to avoid. And I hope you have a great journey with orchids. Thank you for watching, and thank you rePotme for sponsoring yet another episode from our Orchid Care for Beginners series. Subscribe to my channel for more orchid videos, tutorials, experiments, updates, and other fun orchid subjects. If you wish to support the channel, do consider becoming a member or visit the merch store linked down below in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's always nice to stay in touch there as well. And with that said, I'll see you next time. Bye!